kill you.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Patrick Scale. This season, G versus Wing, and that means my co-host is the Tiny Peanut. Oh yeah, like you're in a shell.
Yeah.
You're still in a shell, a tiny shell.
Yeah, tiny shell, tiny little baby peanut.
Tinier than a normal peanut, in case you guys are
Yeah, like, you know
asking.
when you have, like, the tiny one on top and, like, the fat one on the bottom and it looks like a snowman? I'm the head of that doing. Snowman peanut.
And of course, on the audio boards is Lev Van Rensselaer reminding me to remind you, you can email us with questions, comments, queries at zakutalkcast@gmail.com. If you have anything you agree with or violently disagree with, send them our way. We'll look at them on air.
Absolutely.
Well, this week we're going to do 47 of both of these shows, Bob. But before we get into that, Bob, how's your week been going?
Week has been going all right. As of this recording, I am fully vaccinated, so I'm planning on going to an FNM. I have gotten a little bit of recording done in here and there. I have a slew of different things that I'm not really open to talking about right now. Otherwise, I'd be a little more boisterous. What about you, Skeyhill? How's your week looking?
Week's okay here. A lot of prep work in my shoot that happens in almost just 2 weeks now, just a little over 2 weeks.
Ooh.
A lot of pre-production stuff that's done, assembling crew, getting these deals done with both the studio space and the outdoor spaces.
I mean, anything beyond just the professional life? I mean, have you had a good walk? Did a storm happen? Like, be like Lynch and give me a weather report.
Yeah. Well, there's no exciting weather reports here. Southern California. It's always sunny and bright.
Oh, no. So sad for my cold, wet, windy boy.
Yeah, I prefer that to this nothing that's always outside.
The change that New England brought. I got it. So come back home when you're done.
Yes, can't right away.
I know.
A lot more work to be done here.
Yeah, I will say, though, one other thing that you kind of scooped over was the fact that you have yet another one of your video essays up in Vimeo, right?
Oh, yes. I now have one on experimental animation, which I did in a very experimental manner. Probably my most ambitious one yet.
So if you haven't checked that out yet, please check it out.
Yes, all right. Well, Bob, now that we've got all that out of the way, tell me what happens in episode 47 of G Gundam.
Certainly. Episode 47 of G Gundam. Devil Colony activated. Attack of the Shuffle Alliance. Or, in Japanese, Devil Colony Shido. Dai Shingeki Shuffle Dome. So that translates to Devil Colony starts, Great Advance Shuffle Alliance. So, an advancing attack, right?
Yeah.
And Dome, I know we haven't really had to bring it up as part of any of the Shuffle Alliance title things as of yet, but in case we haven't, Dome is just the Japanese for Alliance. But to the episode, Ulube now has the Devil Gundam at its full power and declares war, ordering an immediate evacuation of the Neo-Japan space colony. The Devil Gundam then absorbs the entire Neo-Japan colony to become the Devil Gundam colony. Domon and the members of the Shuffle Alliance join together to fight off the Devil Gundam colony. Dr. Mikamura then sacrifices himself to free Domon's father, Dr. Kashu, whose capsule is then recovered by the ship. Using his Bakunet's Goldfinger, Domon creates an opening into the Devil Gundam colony, and they enter.
Okay.
Yeah, it's succinct. I feel like there's more to talk about here, but the bare bones, it's got it.
The broad strokes.
What about you, Skeyhill? What's going on in Gundam Wing?
Well, we have collision in space. Geki Totsu Suru Uchu.
Yeah, Geki Totsu Suru Uchu. Uchu means space.
Okay, and Suru is in?
I think Suru is one of those conjunction pieces that I'm unfamiliar with. It's not like the particles that we've talked about before, the gas, the was, etc. Gekitotsu is the word clashing. So I'm assuming that the easiest way is to just go, instead of space clash, it's clashing in space or collision in space.
Sure, sounds space clash.
I feel like clash would have made more sense than collision, but I guess it gives us a heads up about something that's going to happen in your description.
Yeah, I mean, there is a literal collision that happens,
yes.
So I don't know. The Eve Wars begin in earnest, but the Gundam pilots are not ready to join Trays yet, but still do think that Libra is the bigger threat and head off in that direction. Sally and Howard decide the only way to stop the massive battleship is to evacuate Peace Million and ram it into Libra's main cannon. Noin decides that she would rather remain by Zex's side than fight him. So what we got going on here?
Well, that's everything that happened on both sides. We had a bunch of large places be evacuated while a large event occurred. That is how you could sum up episode 47 of both of these series.
How I know I'm a beaten man is that the Devil Gundam took over the Japan-shaped colony by merging with it, and I said, yeah, okay.
Hey, listen, we've already seen this established before, and now that we have something that is an even more powerful core than what Kyoji was, because we now have a woman who is the core of this entity, we get to see it at full blast, as opposed to before where it's just like, we're going to go as hard as we can, but we're not as powerful as women, so I'm going to take that as a feminist win.
Yep, woman in a vagina-shaped prison.
Listen, leave Giorgio O'Keefe port alone.
And it looks just like the statue in front of Genova in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah, and this predates FF7, so
that's true.
Take that.
So they must have watched this and was like, aha, they must have saw the Manhattan Combat District have a Statue of Liberty death cannon and thought, yes, this is inspiring.
Well, that's what led to Parasite Eve. Yes, no, I realize how ridiculous it is, but consider, too, that that's almost one-to-one with what Libra does in the series following.
Yeah, but I am okay with the battleship having a giant space cannon, as that sort of makes sense. But hiding it in your Statue of Liberty, it's a bit much for me.
And I don't blame you. For you, that is not great flavor. It is not a good mouthfeel. But I think the burning light of liberty that is one of the icons of America makes sense to be your prominent cannon when you're already doing an absurd star-shaped country, and having an oversized version of the Statue of Liberty be your main monument.
Yep, you're right. All is absurd. It's very nice of Lube to evacuate all the people of Neo Japan before he takes it over. Yeah, it was interesting. Here. It was interesting to note that they had wartime protocols, considering the whole point of this Gundam fight was to have no wars. But I'm glad they had those. They seem to come in handy.
I mean, it comes in as handy as the Statue of Liberty cannon. Every country is prepared for when the possibility of somebody trying to do an usurping might occur. And so everybody else has to be there instead of just being easily taken down. This goes in line, I think, with some of the philosophy that shows up in Wing, where you see how Noin and Catra are like, okay, we're going to have a DL defense unit. We won't make it prominently known to everybody else, and we won't even let our ruler know, but we need to have this. Otherwise, we're screwed when the time comes.
Yes, on the Wing side, they have that, and I think that helps this difficult journey Relina has to go on, where she wants a thing that seems unattainable, and even her followers kind of believe that. And that gets us through the halfway point. Here, it does also make sense, because every time there's like this, okay, I'm going to rule this time, but then give up power peacefully later, at least in the classical world, it only ever ends with somebody being like, I'm not giving it up anymore. Usually after the very first time they do it. So the fact that the future century could get through like 12 of these, 13 of these, pretty good. Pretty good system they had for a bit.
Well, remember, there's that hiccup that happens for a span of, like 8 or 9 years, where they don't have the Gundam fight because a war does end up breaking out between Neo England and some other countries, because Neo England wins 3 times in a row with Chapman.
You're too good at this, Neo England. We're mad.
You must be cheating if you're going to be able to have a guy who can constantly shoot us down. And obviously he's aging out. So what the hell? Why are we fighting like this?
Oddly, Domon is mad at Liu. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for him to be mad at Liu, but he's like, you're the reason why all these people died. And it's a bunch of people flash up that really were the fault of Master Asia and Wo-Fat. So I'm not sure why he's taking that out on him.
So I can understand his logic. The person who was the puppet master of all the events that made this occur was Ulube. We're applying the idea that if it were not for Ulube's plans to try and manipulate this scenario, we wouldn't have Master Asia start into any of this. We wouldn't have lost Kyoji because he wouldn't have been forced to take the Ultimate Gundam to run away from Ulube. We wouldn't have had Dr. Kashu be put into freezing, and we wouldn't have had Mom get shot down by the army at his request. By way of that, we also wouldn't have had Schwarzbruder have to sacrifice himself in order to make sure that everything followed through in a way that kept the Devil Gundam from resurrecting. All these people would never have had to go through that if Ulube had never started the acquisition of the Ultimate Gundam.
Well, couldn't I blame Dr. Kashu then for building the thing in the first place?
Even still, we're talking about weapons and machine designs. At some point, whether it's Neo-Japan, Neo-Russia, Neo-China, what have you, you're going to have somebody try to develop a Gundam that is going to surpass all Gundams. In the case of Dr. Kashu, he's trying to do something that helps rather than just do the fighting thing. He's trying to do experiments in making a Gundam that can help replenish itself, people, planets. He's trying to make a world peace device, and because of the way that it got forced out of the hands of these very selfish individuals that he did not want to have it, it made it take a crack. It's a Dark Crystal situation, right? You ever see Dark Crystal?
No.
Okay. Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal. The whole mythology runs around the idea of a purifying white crystal that at some point an asshole in the group decides to crack it, and a shard gets knocked out. By way of that, it splits the entities that were basically the prime godly beings into 2 entities that are very diametrically opposed, and it creates a sort of ruin because of it, because of the actions of an individual that wanted to take something that gave to the world and use it for an ill-gotten purpose or try to impart it themselves onto it. That selfishness is very much like a falling star, like the morning star, like Lucifer. The Ultimate Gundam was an angel that got shot down, and because it got shot down, it was twisted. We're trying to use the Lucifer mechanic here to explain why the Ultimate Gundam is the Devil Gundam.
Well, I would use the Frankenstein model where Kashu makes this affront to God by trying to play it, building this Devil Gundam.
Yeah, but you're already a Char Aznavour apologist, so I don't really have much salt on your speaking.
I mean, I think you would be too, as a person that doesn't like oppressed people being oppressed by oppressive systems.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at, is I don't see where you're seeing the oppression here from an individual who was doing something independently, and then the military comes in and says, yeah, that's great research and everything. We're going to use that as an atom bomb. Cool?
I'm not seeing any oppression here. You had said, Domon is fair to take the blame off of those other 2 that did the killings because this guy set that in motion. But I'm saying Domon Kashun set that in motion, sent the Alubu thing in motion just by building it.
Dr. Kashu does have some level of impetus in the whole of this. There is no denying that if you go further back, you could say that the whole point of going away from the wars into the Gundam fight is the impetus for Dr. Kashu eventually building this thing. You can find other people to blame for everything, but he never took away that it was Won Yun Fat's problem. Wanyan Fat was still considered a dick. At least, I don't know if your English dub tries to say something different, but on my side, the subs clearly state that without Liu Bei doing the thing, none of these people's lives would have been lost. There's no acknowledgement of Wanyan Fat when I'm watching. There's only they talk about Master Asia, and Master Asia is thrown off course because he sees an opportunity in using this Gundam that can help regenerate the planet while eradicating the parasite, which is humans. He has a twisted mindset, but they resolve that at the end of their squabble episodes back.
Yeah, he's one of the people Domon's mad that is dead now.
Yeah, because he found redemption.
Yeah. No, I don't have a problem with that. But this to me, it just feels like a lazy way to be like, see, he really is the final villain because he's the one that sort of set all this up. But like, not advertently. No, it was more of an accident. So he should still kind of be mad at Master Asia and Wolfat and just like, oh, he kidnapped my girlfriend and is now trying to take over the universe. This guy's an asshole. I got to defeat him.
So we've talked about this, I think literally just last episode, the idea of the hidden final boss, right?
Yeah, again, okay. I don't have a problem with
this guy is Garland. This guy is actively Garland.
Not actively.
He is an individual who was the initiator of a minor inconvenience in our hero's situation that then is able to hide away for a while and then with the power of this ultimate being become the final boss.
Well, it's not a minor inconvenience. He needs to do that to send himself back in time, as complicated as that is. If Liu Bei doesn't send Domon down into the Gundam fight, he doesn't get in a position where he can take advantage of the Devil Gundam because Master Asia and Wolfat's plan works.
Presuming that he doesn't have a way to manipulate whatever fighter comes in that is not Domon.
There seems to be nobody on the Earth or the Earth sphere better than Domon. He just won the Gundam fight. Domon riding through space on his horse.
Yeah.
His horse mobile suit. Doesn't seem to be any thrusters. The horse is literally running through space.
Well, I think the intent with that was like brief biffs of thruster whenever it galloped. They might not show it, and I agree with you. They should have shown a little bit more of how this is able to work. But
I mean, not realistic robo, right? So they could do whatever they want.
Yes, but even still, you can imagine that the thruster unit on when it's just a platform is probably its hooves. So you have to do a little bit of I'm trying to find the word that I wanted to say here. You have to do a bit of inferring on your part because they're expecting that you're going to make that jump in assumption, but that's poor writing. I will agree with you.
I mean, it's just like the audience has seen people moving ahead on a horse before. It doesn't matter that it's in space. They're just going to buy it. So fine.
Yeah, because we're mixing space fantasy, man.
Yeah, I know.
Your chagrin to it all.
I know. Interestingly, in our theoretical rewriting of the show, I actually don't know how useful this reveal that Liu Bei is the previous fighter as like a big shocking thing is necessary. I think you could get more mileage out of it if he reveals it early on, because what we were talking about last week to help him not feel like he comes out of nowhere is like he becomes like this alternate mentor for Domon early on. He's like, these are things you got to watch out for in the fight. And then when Master Asia comes back, now he's kind of torn between the two, but he thinks Master Asia's the bad guy. But then Master Asia atones at the end, and it turns out Liu Bei's been the bad guy. I think you get a fun dichotomy there, more than just this shocking reveal is can add to your show.
I 100% agree with you. I do think that, not to fully go into your camp, but just to toe the line, I think that when Stalker mentions that this story just does not want to allow itself to end, I think that's the issue here, is that the post-fight thing, it can feel a little jammed in. I will say to this too, based on my having watched some of the Sentai style shows that were airing at that time, 92, 93, 94 Sentai stuff all had a very similar, like, last handful of episodes. We get our ultimate big bad sort of show up almost out of nowhere. They're just being presumed to be the ultimate evil, the ultimate bad guy. And we have to manage whatever we've got from there. So I think it was just a trend of the time that you have the Ultra Boss show up after defeating what you presumed was your final boss at the end of each series.
The Russians, once again proving, can always count on them.
Oh?
Yes, right. They're how everybody else gets into space. Argo gets his little ending. She's like, well, for your friends. And now you're not a prisoner either anymore.
Because I'm becoming a pirate with you.
Yeah, well, so I was just like, finally, some subtext in this show. Mm-hmm. Right? The implication there is that, I don't care what they think. I'm in love with you. I want to be by your side no matter what happens after this.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well,
give me more of that. That was great.
I don't know if they mention it directly on your side well enough, but that's his ship. That's his pirate ship that was confiscated with his crew. Like, that's ultimate. Like, you got close enough, kid. Let me be part of your prize. Yeah,
right. I'm glad that gets resolved. I bet the other three will get their thing too in these last two episodes. But good to get Argo out of the way, and now she's like in command of the crew of the ship. She knows her shit.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
I also love that we only have half of the Team America group on the bridge, because we also have Zensan and Suisan.
Yeah, you got to get them in there. Yeah, Wing Gundam, what's standing out to you here?
Well, it is weird to see long hair Un in short hair Un's place and having to see her tearing up while having to watch the man she loves in a battle for life and death, and just being told to, hang out. It's fine. I'm gonna be fine. It seems like a bit of a hard turn for her to have to deal with when she just came out of a coma and was able to start resolving some of her misguided understanding of what the war at hand was. This is very heavy for her, and I think we really downplay that here.
Yeah, she's taken up the mission control kind of role here. With Trey's on the front lines, he can't see the whole battle.
Yeah.
He is good at guesstimating based on what is happening in his vicinity, including when Libra decides to move around MO2 to attack the Earth directly. But she has to kind of get the whole picture in mind and kind of command her troops accordingly in place of Trey's. And I actually think she's sad, based on what her line is, about kind of that all these people are going to have to die for the bigger picture.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, but I do think that there is a point here where it's not only has the entire war changed in the period that she was shot to this moment. There's been a lot of changes in those months that have passed, but also she finally came to resolve her understanding of her direct affections for him, and she can't say anything because she's having to command these troops. So while, yes, I do see her having the fair maiden perspective of Lawn Hair Un, trying to make sure that everybody in space can live happily while also having to deal with working on the side of the Earth in this case, I think she's also burying underneath here. Why do you want to go on a death run when I just woke up?
Well, I would say, I think, maybe I should save this for another time.
There's 2 episodes left, Skeyhill. Unless you think you're doing it next week, just get it out of the way.
We're doing it in one of these weeks, so I'll save it for then.
Sure.
There's only the 2 weeks left.
Other things that stood out. I appreciate that it was very subtly nodded at between 2 moments in the show, but from the moment that Hiro gets his cut on his arm and Relina wants him to have an opportunity to heal it up, and then jumping forward into the episode when he's about to get ready to go into the Zero and he has a white bandage around his arm, one can assume that it was just him patching himself up as he has in the past, but I like to believe that in this period, she may have bandaged him up before going off because they share that silent moment before he finally gets into his cockpit.
Yeah, in the manga, she actually, because it's a lot more compressed, she escapes with Hildy. Hiro never goes over to Libra. So she leaves with Hildy, arrives in Peace Million. Hiro's going to go out to duel Zex like he did a few episodes ago. And he's like, you got to stay here. We're going to need you after the war. And she's like, okay, but you're coming back, right? And he doesn't really say anything. And then he flies off. And she thinks he's, based on the implication that she thinks he's going out to die. And it makes her quite upset. And she tries to convince him not to go it, that he doesn't have to do it that way. And Hiro's just like, my life is cheap. It's all right.
So do you then feel that that instance carries more weight than what we got in the anime, or do you feel like the anime gives a sufficient weight on its own?
I know. I'm trying to think. In the manga, it's not so bad. But if you had animated it and had voice actors, it could be overstated. But I like this implication that Hiro is sort of going out with an expectation that he won't come back, and that Relina kind of has to deal with that. Maybe they speak less words, but I would find a way to imply that Hiro himself is ready to go on another suicide mission.
Yeah, but it's also curious because I know that we've talked about the loser mentality, and I wonder if, and you only have to give me a yes or a no to this. I want to know if, one, the G team are going to be shown as having their loser moment for the sake of us, the viewer, and two, if the loser mentality that we get to see now in Hiro, now that the series is ending and that he has had all these experiences, that he now has something to fight for in Relina that he didn't have before in simply do X, your life means nothing.
I will say that for the first one, you will see something along those lines. And for the second one, you will get a resolution to it in some form or another.
I know that I'm picking around for bits and pieces that we can talk about. Like, we don't have to talk about this, but I do appreciate that the other four members of the G team, that they are able to start thinking in a more tactical mindset and being willing to compromise with each other, as opposed to before, not even a handful of episodes ago, where they were all like, no, we're just going to do what we do because we do what we do best separately. They've learned that, no, we do have to work with each other. And I just appreciate seeing that growth, even if it is done in a very relatively short amount of time.
Well, in theory, they are doing what they do separately. They all gone off to different missions, but they're better coordinated, right? And this was sort of the interesting thing about this battle with Zex, is that they're having that tough time coordinating, and Zex is going after the only one that can help them do that.
Yeah.
But thanks to what Catra can do, so I think that might be how they kind of learn this ability to do that when they didn't have it before. It is rushed, but like it is sort of a cool idea for a battle where Hiro's able to kind of one-on-one hold his own, but everybody else, even when they're all after Zex together, sort of just getting their asses handed to them.
Well, it doesn't help that we've suddenly done the Gundam equivalent of a phalanx formation.
Yeah, yes, also true. Zex, the only one able to kind of properly utilize these mobile dolls, it seems. Trey's on the battlefield, refusing to leave until every mobile doll is destroyed.
It's almost like that was the plan to begin with,
according to his philosophy. Also, very nicely, saluting the Peace Million as it goes on its crazy suicide crash.
Yeah. I appreciate that the ancillary doctor, Dr. Six here, because I'm not remembering his name, but you know
Howard,
the one.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate that he is not only a more active participant, but is totally willing to sacrifice the Peace Million in order to stop this cannon from going off.
Can't have it destroying the Earth now. That'd be no good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just appreciate that he is a more active hand instead of what we find out later is Duo finds the other five doctor variants who are all just hanging out. Yeah, we're going to do some dickery, but we're mischievous old men. and we all have a different quirk, so, appreciate us.
Yep, they were the ones who built in this trope of a cannon that can't fire too rapidly. The implication is, well, of course it could, but we thought it'd be funny if it didn't.
We can't give them a broken one. We don't want to die, but we can give them an impediment.
Yeah, just like when they built the V8 and the Mercurius, they were once again caught and held prisoner to build this Peace Million and help design it. And now they get to go and take their revenge with the help of Duo.
I am looking forward to seeing how that works. And I too felt as exasperated as Duo when they were trying to explain how they were going about it. Like, I get it. I desperately want to shoot you right now, but I get it.
Yeah. Yep. Duo has every reason to be mad at them. Troa's acrobatics work a lot better in space.
Of course they do.
Very convenient there.
It's almost like he can kite all these other security people toward him and just dodge everything while everybody else has a better chance of getting to their missions.
Yeah, he does the dodge. He even does a little bow at the end.
Yeah.
Very good performer.
I love it.
Yeah, mostly set up for these last two episodes. Mm-hmm. Not too dissimilar from yours, right? They both kind of now broken in to the final base.
So to that end, I guess I'll ask, having seen two series in tandem side by side, do you feel like there might be a pattern in the episode structures that they use?
Yeah, so that is sort of the crux of what this show was. And I don't think overall they sync up. I think their plot points happen in the way that both of them need to. I think both of them get kind of their mid-act victory in their own thematic way. Mm-hmm. Both of them enter their second and third acts in pretty similar fashions. This is kind of one of the more, they both get the new suits-ish around the time that they're supposed to happen. This is really the easiest one-to-one comparison, though. But it's not too surprising since both of them are ending with giant spaceship confrontations.
Certainly.
It's kind of the logical place you would go.
I feel like that's the bulk of the things that struck me for the episode. I mean, I appreciate some of the tropier bits, the things that had more heart in them, like the Noin trying to face off against Zex and then realizing she couldn't, but is willing to stand by him, not necessarily as a participant, but just as moral support for him. There's the unspoken understanding of, you're trying to do something. I don't know what it is. You look like an asshole, but I don't think you are. I appreciate that. Is there anything else in this episode in particular that you want to point out that I haven't approached yet?
Just something interesting to think about. At some point in the show, they talk about that the White Fang is just one portion of space and that there are other portions of space colonists that want peace. But the two things that come to my mind are, well, do they want peace if the Earth still gets to exploit them? Is that the price that they have to pay for their peace? Is that a price worth paying? Mm-hmm. And then two, what is the population of the space colonists that align with the White Fang that would be acceptable for this to be the path that they're taking? Is it 51%? Is it 60%? 70%? Like, what philosophically do you think of those two thoughts?
I think what you're saying is very similar to what the old man in the village outside of the Sand Kingdom was trying to point out, the idea of abstaining from rocking the boat in order to maintain a more simplified life. Because there are, I believe, some people, because if nothing else, I think this show has a fair amount of perspective and philosophy takes. I feel like there are some people that are willing to just let certain inconvenient things happen around them if it means that their personal life doesn't really change all that much. Just go with the flow. Don't look the officer in the eye. Nod your head as you're getting your registration out of the car. We have similar things to that in our lives here in America, because I can't speak for the world over. And I think that it does bring into question how much I'm really not doing justice by using the term inconvenience here, but
yeah,
how many injustices to the people are allowable when the greater good is you are kept safe, You're able to do what you want within the bounds of the reasoning of this governing body. There are a lot of questions here that I feel are a lot bigger than me simply answering, yeah, I agree, or no, I don't. I have to leave it at that because I've got a lot of soapboxes here and I don't want to start climbing. The second one, though.
Yeah.
I feel like there is no great way to really manage a percentile of who backs a given entity, whether it's White Fang or Oz or what have you. Because as we saw with the White Fang, they're an insurgent group. They themselves refer to themselves as a kind of patriot group, a kind of revolutionist group, using terms that we would use here in the States. And because of that, there's always going to be a minority of individuals, perceived or otherwise, that are going to say, this isn't right. I'm going to set the world right by doing this. You see that in leftists like myself. You see that in Tea Party members. You see that in a variety of individuals. And I think that as much as I want a unification of the people at large, there's likely always going to be a minority that says, no, fuck that, because I know my way is the right way. Lather, rinse, repeat ad infinitum.
Sure. So our heroes, from us living in a democracy where we see our heroes wanting to sort of achieve some goal that they think is right for both the space colonies and the Earth. But if the majority of both of those populations wanted this, is it right for the Gundams to go in and intervene?
I think that in the case of the Gundams, we first have to establish a point here that this is intended to be a action hero anime. I want to have that little film on this as I say the rest of what I think that having individuals who are not associated with governing bodies and with certain other aspects of the political arena create for a better perspective than those who are associated with certain movements. Having people who are effectively the hypocrites. I mentioned this briefly when I talked about the Animorph thing some episodes ago. Having hypocrites that don't like other people having that power while trying to be as balanced of a version of that power makes sense. If I'm not saying that, whether it's the Taliban or the fucking QAnon or whatever, I don't think that that's necessarily the route that I mean here, because they're all fucking nuts. But if you want to have something of a balance, there has to be the line between the yin and yang, these conceits, in order for it to settle in. If you have Earth wipe out the space colonists, right, then what are you doing? You're effectively enclosing yourself back on Earth, and you're going back to World War I, II, etc. If you leave it all in space, it's unlikely that it's going to be sustainable for long before eventually succumbing to whether it be space madness or a lack of proper resources, and you just create a timeline of death that can only be elongated more than what is occurring on the planet, because at least you have the natural resources that you were built to have. You can create some sustainability on these space stations, but there's a limitation. There has to be, right? So at what point do you say, okay, now we pivot from Gundam building and militaristic desires to faster than light speed travel to find Earth 2, So the Earth does not want to wipe out the colonies. They just want to keep them under control because ostensibly they believe that they can all live in peace now. Well,
the space colonies want to self-govern.
I want to point out, you say this, the space colonists are treated as second-class citizens by those individuals on Earth.
Correct.
So that to say that we can live in peace so long as you do what we say.
Ostensibly, yes.
Yeah. Sorry. I just want to make sure that was clear, but continue your points.
Yep. So that's clear. And then the space colonies want to govern themselves, but also militarize to make sure the Earth can't fight them anymore. And the Gundams say, both of you guys are wrong. You're just going to keep doing some battles, so we're going to step in. But if you're okay with one of those, Bob, then you open the door for the people those organizations you listed that you don't like. So that's the tricky part, because in the way the show presents it, like we're on their side. But if we were living in the world and that was happening up there, maybe we might view them as a QAnon type force.
Well, that's why I'm pulling us back to the film that I placed on this as we went in.
Yeah, but that's not it. That's worthless. Because this is made up.
No. Hear me out. We are being presented this perspective from the idea that we are supposed to like these Gundam kids. We are given more information than we would if we were a third party, private citizen that's just sitting on their chairs in their living rooms on Earth or in space and seeing what we're being given from third party perspectives. It's not coming directly from Sally Poe's mouth. It's not coming from Trey's directly. It's coming from reporters who give us a thing from Trey's, who give us a thing from what they say is going on in space with the Gundams. So when you have these multiple layers, it's hard not to give into another person's perspective because you are not there as a primary source. I have trouble taking anybody for granted on these things because there is a lot more heft and weight on these things that you can't necessarily give full credence to if you are not there in person and able to have this omniscient point of view that we have as the viewer.
Okay,
I
where we go,
think
Tom?
there's just too much that can be stated here where you can play gotcha on either side.
All right, way we go time here.
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
It's just more of this. Like, this is why it's easier, I don't know, what more interesting to me about this realistic robo stuff, because then you can strip away sort of the sci-fi elements and then bring it into our political sphere. And you can kind of avoid dodging the question because they're tough ones. But if you're trying to step back because we wouldn't in real life have this primary source to form a full judgment on it, like, it's a little like disharmonious with what you said earlier when you were sort of mocking QAnon and Taliban and calling them nuts because we've only gotten secondhand reports on what they're doing and what they feel. So, right, you formed your opinion already based on them, but haven't actually been around them.
Okay, so I will say that this is one of the few things that makes me glad that I'm only a part-time host on here, because if I'm being honest, Skeyhill, I don't like this centrist mentality of being able to allow for, look at it from the perspective of the people that want to say that these people are not allowed to exist, or that these people over here are not praying to my religion, so obviously they need to be either cut down or made to subjugate. There, you can always do the what about their perspective thing. And I think that it is human nature to have difficulty going between what their primalist instinct is to group up with each other with like-minded individuals and create preconceived notions versus trying to use the logic and reason and everything else that we have as learned animals and try to, if you have the empathy aspect, try to take from them and understand and what have you, but also be like, well, just by logic, they're wrong. By these words, by Socrates, by Ayn Rand, whatever you want to use as your basis for your philosophy, you have to somehow mix that with other points and come to a muddy conclusion for yourself that you live by. You're going to say contradictory stuff to yourself in order to better manage the world around you. I am not saying that my perspective is fully sound, and I'm not saying that my perspective is fully based on a logic over emotion or vice versa. I am saying that to play this game of trying to understand the world at large is difficult, and that those things that I want may not be met by the things that I understand as being viable avenues. I don't think it's right to say that comparing QAnon, who very clearly have some things that they want to do in the United States that is a problem for those people that I love and care about, is a perspective that I want to see from, compared to understanding that these characters in an animation that is supposed to be making commentary, but even done so in a muddy way in and of itself, it is not a text that I put on the same layer as that of Greek philosophers. It is not the same level as the philosophies given in various religions and cults. I think it's a false equivocation to use this as a text in the way that one might use insert book here, Enneagram, Bible, Quran, what have you.
Well, I guess because it's my way we go, I don't think it's less equivalent, because it did spur these thoughts in me just watching it and be like, what is the right way to go about this? Is it easy to just put up your shield and be like, nope, your way is wrong. You must perish because you're hurting the people I care about? Because then we're sort of in the Wu Fei position. I don't know. I don't have an answer to this either, and neither does the show. It's part of its flaw that it tries to give you an answer and it can't, so it gives you a really stupid one, a really false one. But I don't think just avoiding it or not trying to examine it and not trying to constantly reevaluate what your priorities are and how you want to go about achieving the world you want to achieve should be avoided. I think that's a bad approach to take, and it's just going to propagate the cycle that we're currently in, and nobody's happy with it.
I do understand where you're coming from. I do understand the way you go to an extent. I do think this is one of those situations where, just by way of how we perceive our world around us and the difficulties that we have in whatever we might have in that aspect of us, it's hard to allow for either of us to say that the other one has an agreeable enough point that we can come to terms with our own shortcomings as entities that don't know everything and that don't have an answer that they feel comfortable enough to finalize. This is a lifelong process, and I think that just saying, oh, but you, is not going to get us anywhere.
No, and that's not my goal. The point is that there aren't answers. And one of the problems I think we have is that we act as if there are. And we're not willing to keep changing our answers as we go, or acknowledge when we've been wrong in the past and move forward from there. And I think this self-examined life is not worth living. And I think we're all too keen with doing that so we can fit in with whatever group we believe in, and then we can't really get ourselves out of it.
There are points in that statement that I do agree with, but I do think that there is something missing in there. I feel like to allow for all these perspectives to be based on my hearing of things, right? I might be misunderstanding. To believe that everybody's perspective is valid in some way it's false in its own right, because then you're allowing for the mind to, I'm trying to find the right words here because this is a very nuanced thing. I believe in the equal happiness of all persons and the allowance of people to find new avenues towards that happiness. By way of that, when I find people who would spout this rhetoric of hate or of this rhetoric of denial of one's humanity by way of the fact that they want to do something different and scary that is to them, is harmful to the evolution of us as a species, as a society. So when you have groups that say, you can't go in here because you tell me I have to use pronouns that don't necessarily match how I perceive you right now, or you are not allowed to go to the same school as my kid because you have a different tone to your melanin complexion. There are some very clear things that appear as a ruthless, vile thing to me. And when people say, oh, but look at it from their perspective, or you're just hearing the too loud ones, I'm sure there are some in there that are a little more moderate. But I also feel like moderation is the glove into which tyranny can place its hand. to always be in the center is something that allows for, yes, a kind of intellectual enlightenment. But I also feel that it allows for you to hand wave a lot of things because that's just what society is allowing for now. Go back to the 60s and segregation. Go back to the 40s and the development of color coding, meaning gender association. There are a lot of these things that if you just hand wave it as, I don't believe what these people, Nazis or KKK or what have you, are doing is right, but maybe they have some points, is bullshit answer to me. You know, to do the quiet part instead of it saying the quiet part out loud, you shouldn't be having that at all, in my opinion. And that you should redevelop the priorities of what you believe are villainous acts or heathen identities and all of that, to vilify people for having a way of life that is non-harmful and merely a way towards a kind of peace is something that I have trouble resolving.
Okay, so you're like the show and you're okay kind of going to war and fighting for these things and having people die rather than moving to the moderation.
I feel like, based on the way that I have grown up and the things that I have had to live with in my life, and this series of understandings that if you let people do what they're going to do, there's going to be problems regardless. I have never been one to want to have to go to a war or be drafted for something. Domination over a landmass or the gain of a precious resource. Those are things that I do not approve of as being a war point, I'll call it here. But to harm the integrity of individuals who are trying to live a peaceful life but are just doing something that does not make sense to another person, I will protect that person. There's no such thing in this world as a pure group, right? No group is not without fault. There are people, individuals inside a group that you cannot necessarily approve of everything they say or do. I think that is a fair point. But when you look at a group in sum and see that what they are doing is not harming groups or maliciously towards individuals, if you were to tell me that every brown-eyed person had power over blue-eyed people, right? Do we say that we don't go to war because it doesn't matter, they can just put in contacts and call it a day? Do we say that if someone is balding versus someone who has a full set of hair, does that mean that the bald need to be put down or put on to Logan's Run because the haired are the ones that are truly the ones in the right because of genetics, because of a eugenic situation? I don't think so. So I think the perspective has too much nuance to it to be able to answer in a way that we can appreciate, because different people put different things at different values. The things that I value, as I'm to understand it based on our friendship of over 15 years, are generally lower on the totem pole compared to those things that you value, which I consider either very lofty, very capable, but with time instead of trying to barrel forward at all costs. The things that you and I, as just two individuals, have are diametrically opposed in some ways and able to be seen in others. I don't think this is something that can be stated as a catch-all for everyone, because there are people that just have no care on the same level that you and I might have on any of these subjects.
So you think that this question I pose is a little, or you think these kind of big questions are a little too nuanced to kind of answer in our dinky little podcast?
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Okay, but you actually, I don't know, it feels like you do have very strong opinions on these things. You said that there are certain people that want to harm the people that you care about, and you don't want to see it from their point of view because you don't think that's going to help them, and that could lead to a rote of tyranny, which may or may not be true. But, you know, you kind of have come out and said certain people's happiness is more important than other people's happiness, and you find no nuance in that perspective.
If you're going to tell me that I need to give the same level of care and attention to someone who says that if a woman wears blue and has short hair, so obviously they're a dude, that their perspective and saying that we don't call them a woman is right, I have problem with that. I take umbrage with it because that's somebody who just doesn't want to have a minor change in their life of saying she, her instead of he, him. Or if a person is going to a job interview and because they got the job over somebody else because they come from a group that has been marginalized versus this person who will have luck in other places, typically speaking, at the same kind of job, just not in this particular instance, that I need to feel bad for them because this person got the job instead, then I have to disagree. I do think that there are some cases where the inconvenience is minor enough that their happiness is being conflated with somebody else having to be null. This person does not need to exist, ergo I get to be happy now, is the kind of evil that I am opposed to, which I think is more prominent, at least in my sphere, than in your sphere. And the problem with trying to answer these kinds of questions on a, as you put it, dinky podcast, is that, one, this is not something that is airing over on Breitbart. This is not something that is airing on the Young Turks. We are not individuals that are so extreme that we are not able to see reason, but to falsely equate the idea that someone being pissy because we're calling someone she, her instead of he, him, or they, them. The fact that people still have a problem with they, them because you don't say the mailman, he is the one who came by. If you say the mail person came by because they dropped off your package, that throws someone into a fucking tizzy. The fact that you don't say happy holidays instead of Merry Christmas, you know, if I say happy holidays when somebody says Merry Christmas to me and they lose their shit, am I in the wrong because I included other people's religions and happy days into their thing where they want to hear, no, Christ is right? I'm not going to give the satisfaction to people to be like, I'm pissy because I don't want to hear, just like you don't want to hear me. That contention is on both sides. And to say, well, why can't you placate, is an easy way to say, why are we even talking about this?
So I'm not saying anything. I'm just trying to parse out what you've told me to understand other people better. But what I'm hearing, I
don't understand your perspective, though, my friend.
So what I'm hearing that maybe I find troubling to understand is that it sounds like you from the outside have determined what is and is not inconvenient from others, and you have picked this set of arbitrary values that you think is right and have decided that their arbitrary values are incorrect and that you want them to have to change and live a certain way. I'm just not feeling how you're different than they are other than these cosmetic points of view.
Well, I think
whether or not I agree with the things you say isn't relevant because I agree with a lot of the things that you say, but trying to figure out how to get there has been troublesome in dealing with the obstacles that are there because what we're doing right now I don't think is working. So what I'm trying to find is a solution.
Okay, and that's fair. I see some of what you're saying, and I don't mean for this to take too long. I do enjoy this repartee, but as I said earlier on, I understand that what I'm saying in my perspective is just as flawed as anyone else's in regards to the generalized, how do we get to a place where this piece that Relina offers is even viable, right? I think that that's kind of where you're coming from with this. Okay. I do.
Or like, how do we avoid this giant battle that the protagonists of this show are themselves trying to stop? Is it something that we should be trying to stop? Should we, trying to help oppress people, should we go to China and should we go to war with China? Should we go to war with Russia? Should we fight these African juntas that are riling up these child soldiers? Is that something we should get involved with to keep these people from being oppressed?
I think that, again, the problem comes into where do we, I jokingly called the people under Chibity Team America earlier. When do we stop being a presumed law force? Where we have the capacity to do certain things.
Yeah.
I understand why some people are pro-war, pro going into battles on behalf of other nations, because we look at ourselves as a first world nation and have all this money and I don't care for the war machine, because from my perspective, and I will say this clearly, from my perspective, I think the wars that America puts us through are bullshit, and they have been since 1949. I also believe that if people cry out against the injustices that are being done, I think it's wrong to just turn a blind eye. Example, Afghanistan did not necessarily ask for us to come in, clean them all up, put them in denim jeans, and call them America 2 Electric Boogaloo. But we've stayed there for about 2 decades. We are now pulling people out. And as we start having our presence depleted, because we didn't do anything beyond station people to play soldier and be Call of Duty members, we are now seeing that these people have not had a sustainable way to maintain themselves in a place of safety. And we're already seeing individuals from radical groups trying to overtake those areas. As much as I want to have peace, there has to be a way to make sure that people can maintain that peace themselves. I do not believe in guns. I believe that if you're going to kill a person, you're going to kill them with your eye to eye. I don't want people to do that. But if you're going to do that, you're not going to make it a goodbye button. There are a lot of things that I believe, and it is not something that I myself can fully equate to being a correct way of life. It is my way of life. And same to be said of those perspectives. But when malice comes into play based on one's perceptions of the world that is the true way of life, as they might believe themselves, if you say that one of my dearest friends, I love her to death and I've known her nearly as long as you, that she is invalid because she was assigned male at birth and is now getting to live her best life, then I'm going to have a problem with that individual, because that person is near and dear to me. And to denigrate her and all these people that are in her and by way of that my life is something that I will not stand for. If a punch is thrown, I will be there to either take the hit, block the hit, or double down on it. But that is an individual talking about individual microcosmic things. To talk about macrocosmic things in the way of nations on hand, or in this case, ultra nations by way of these colonies and this planet, because again, we're still on a Gundam podcast and not a philosophy and politics podcast necessarily. I think that to conflate the ideas of what the individual feels on an individual basis versus what an individual might feel on a macro basis versus what a macro society might have on that basis against another macro society. There are too many different moving gears and pieces that one could ever come up with a quote unquote true solution. I think that there is no way to be able to meet that, especially in a single generation. It is going to take years on years on years. I'll go on record and say that I believe in a globalist society at this point, because at this point, there's no reason to not be a globalist society. And because money is just paper that has an assigned value among other people, there's no reason that we couldn't have a united credit system. There's no reason why we couldn't help people to fashion a better living situation. And there's no reason why we couldn't have people not be subjugated because of where they live, what caste they were born into, what gender they were assigned at birth, so on and so on and so on. But that's the perspective of one weeb who has dreams of being a voiceover artist and had and may still have aspirations towards a better political future.
What's interesting here, because this is a problem I think a lot of us have, is that we have this sort of small sphere that we care about. And this is sort of the big problem, is that you would defend your friend from this person that doesn't want them to be themselves. A student in China that isn't allowed to study or is killed because they're trying to learn Western ideals or thoughts, you are not caring about because you've dehumanized them as China in general.
That is putting words in my mouth, thank you.
Well, that's what you said. You were talking about, you were looking at them as a macro scale and too many things to consider because there's too many moving parts. But would you go to war if we had to fight half of America for trans rights?
In the case of the situation that you just said, probably. Yeah. Probably. Okay. In the case of saying that I would turn a blind eye to an individual that I have no knowledge of existing and is not part of some greater issue that is happening in the world, because it is just as likely that they were canned for being a person looking into Western ideologies as much as a person who is shitposting about Mao being Winnie the Pooh. Like, it's hard to say an individual that you have no knowledge of existing's worth versus a person that you have active sight on. Like, if I were out in the city and someone was being assaulted because of the way they looked, the life that they chose to live, or some other thing that is really none of the business of another person beyond just giving a basic how do you do, I'm going to defend that person. Did that person who is being assaulted do something wrong? They could have. And if they did do something wrong, I still want them to meet their justice, but not because they are visually how they are or living the life that they live, because that is unjust in its own right. If that person's kicking this person's ass because they're living their best gender life, but that person stole from that person because they needed a quick couple of bucks because trans people are often put into very tight situations, I'm still going to scold this person and I will find the best way to help them, the person who is stealing the money, but I'm also going to stop the asshole who's stomping them and calling them slurs just because their fucking money was almost taken. There's a lot that I know in my life, Bob Skerry's life, are contradictory and are fluid to change. And I have to deal with those events on a moment by moment basis. I try to live my life as close to a code that I can believe in. But that is Bob Skerry. That is not Patrick Skeyhill. That is not any of these other people that we know. And unfortunately, with 7 billion plus people, and thankfully slowly diminishing because we are overpopulating this fucking planet, and these soapboxes, why did you place them under me before we got to the end of your show? I feel it's important to recognize that while you and I can have this conversation and come to an understanding of what the other person might value and how they might react in a given scenario, two people in armchairs talking about anime and politics are not going to help us necessarily find the ultimate way of meeting a world peace scenario. I do think that we, in maintaining wars over non-important things, to me, again, we don't need to fight over oil. We don't need to fight over land. These are things that are no longer a problem because we understand the finite nature of the earth and how to maintain different ways of energy or product or whatever. But when you start taking away human life because you don't agree with the way that they live that human life, and that way of life is not harming individuals in any physiological, psychological, or emotional way, then what the fuck?
So there's no need to downplay us in our armchair thinking, because this is how any discourse happens. And it's not like we're speaking out of our butts, right? We're both thoughtful beings that have ruminated on these things for very much. And part of my interest in this did come from a show like Gundam Wing that was posing these tough questions. And we can make fun of it for being an anime and not Aristotle, but the only reason Aristotle is codified is because of how old he is and how he was taught in the medieval period and how it took 1,000 years to prove a lot of his science investigations wrong. but we still keep his philosophies here. So Gundam Wing's just not old, but it doesn't mean it can't be canon. And it's not even what it's trying to say that matters, because what it says, as you'll see in 2 episodes, isn't very useful. But what it brings up and what discussions it could have about things that we might be overlooking as we rush one way or another, perhaps too quickly or without thought, are still important to consider, so that we can consider the thoughts of those, or of the thoughts of ways to make the world that we believe in. But you're right, it will be tough to get there. And there won't be a way to get there. And it will be a road of compromise or sacrifice or false starts or bad mistakes. That's sort of the flaw of being human.
Yeah, so let's take a seat in the nerd corner because
let's
dying
take
of thirst.
A nice breath, quiet, fresh air, low stakes.
Let's take a walk to the nerd corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff. Yeah.
My nerd corner, very low stakes. Right, you remember my spite switch?
Your spite switch, yes.
Yes, well, very good friend of the cast, Dash, was nice, kind enough to send me. I guess they have been able to put both Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII Remastered on one Nintendo Switch card. How far we've come from 4 PlayStation discs. Both of these. One little Switch card, very good. For me, I'm not able to get to it just now, as there are a few projects I have to get through first, but later in the summer I look forward to having fun, living through these memories, experiencing 8 again, experiencing the part of 7 that was just remade, and kind of comparing and contrasting what works about each of those, similar to kind of what we do in this show. Bob, what's your nerd corner this week?
As much as I know that you're trying to calm us down while trying to having boiled my blood, my nerd corner is also about the number 8, and that's Resident Evil 8 Village.
Yes.
Have you had any chance to have it permeate into your nerd sphere at all?
No, I know nothing about this. The only reason I know it came out because you mentioned it last week or so.
So that's wild to me. I think that you would really enjoy the opportunity of playing both Biohazard Resident Evil 7 and Village Resident Evil 8, because these 2 games redefine some of the things that were going wrong with the Resident Evil franchise as of late, where it's been more of a testosterone action game situation with just a light smattering of horror elements. 7, which I'm going to play once I get done with my run of 8, plays more on some of the horror elements of being stuck in a Texas Chainsaw backyard cannibal situation, while still having an element of the RE horror that is involved with chemical situations. I don't want to get too far into it because I do want you to experience it. But then the following game, which does maintain the same main character, has you going through a sort of grim fairy tale meets RE situation. And it's simultaneously horrific, but also it causes a lot of feelings. It feels like anthology horror between the 2 of these, and hopefully what the next one might bring for us. So if you're a person who does like horror as film, not just as video game, I highly recommend both RE7 and RE8.
So check out all those games we mentioned if you find the time or have the system to play those. Well, I'd like to thank Lev Van Rensselaer for keeping the audio so smooth and fresh. I'd like to thank my co-host for going through the ringer with me this week. Bob, do you have any plugs?
Certainly. Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Scary VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk HQ. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other places by my handle, Bob Scary VOA. You can also find me at bobscaryvoa.com to listen to my demos because I'm, in fact, a voice-over artist.
And I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays. There's a new one out. Animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com. And now all of our audio-related products at our sister station, Quixotic Harmonics. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience what is under your umbrella, Ella.
Oh.